And just this dude is so wise, and he hit me with this. He goes, "Are you grieving the lack of relationship, or are you grieving the relationship you could have had?" Welcome back to Humble, where we talk about the real stuff. I'm so glad you joined us for another episode of this show. The fact that you are following, you are a part of this community, like that just means the world to me. So like, thank you so much for being a part of this. And here's what I would ask you. Like, if you're enjoying the content so far, if you're like, okay, like this is, this dude talk about a little something, like I can get behind it. Here's what I'm asking. Just tell somebody. Like, tell somebody about it. You could share this episode with them, as well as being able to subscribe to Patreon, like being a part of what we're doing in our Patreon community to support financially. That would just mean the world to me. Also, like just giving feedback and anything that you have like that's just going to help us be able to make this better and better and better. Like that's helpful to me. So if you're like, this dude's so excited about it, I am, because I really want this to be something that is a blessing to you and blessing to anybody that listens to it. So listen, anything that you decide to give, anything that you decide to do in way of supporting us, like, it is needed, so that way we can pour back into this ministry to be able to help people. So, well, listen, I'm so excited today. I'm going to jump into something that, is, for a lot of you listening, if you know me, maybe you've heard parts of what I'm about to talk about, but maybe not in the fullness of what I'm going to say and how I'm about to communicate it. Today, we're going to talk about fatherhood. And this is a special episode for the sheer fact that I didn't grow up having a great relationship with my dad. And that, I'm going to get into that here in just a second, but I just want to stop and say, if you have just a rough and tough relationship with your dad, and maybe the relationship is estranged, just know I feel that. And we're about to get into some stuff with my relationship with my dad and how God has worked through that. But I want you to know you're not alone. If you have ever felt like that, if you have father issues, if you've dealt with fatherlessness in your life, you're not alone. Number one, the fact that you're hearing me right now is proof of that. And number two, God sees you, and our Heavenly Father has more than enough of His grace, His power, and just His being, His presence in your life to fill the void that maybe you feel is missing. So growing up for me, I always talk about how my mom is my hero because I grew up with a single mom. My mom raised me with the help of my grandma. And we grew up in a small town, Texas. And man, there's a lot, like I've already talked about before, with just growing up in Texas, and kind of just that dynamic of being, the only one of few Black people in our small town. But man, one of those bigger things for me outside of just that dynamic was this dynamic that I didn't have a dad at home. I kind of became this man of the house figure at a young age and didn't really understood what that meant. Because, it was my mom, my grandma, and me for a good chunk of my life. But when I was young, this is such a crazy story that was told to me of just the faithfulness of God. But when I was younger, my mom and my dad ended up getting a divorce. Of course, I was super young, really, really young. I was like maybe a baby, maybe a toddler. I think I was around toddler age when they really finalized everything. And a crazy story that was told to me. My parents ended up splitting, and my mom was like, "Hey, I've got to get out of here because it's not good for me to be be here anymore, to be with my dad. And I'm pretty sure there was definitely some verbal abuse going on. And to my knowledge, there's probably some physical abuse as well. My mom doesn't really talk about it a whole lot. And there's a lot of details in that as well that I won't necessarily get into. But this story though is one that's kind of stuck with me. So when I was a little kid around that time, my mom ended up leaving and she tried to leave with me. And I remember hearing this told to me that my mom went to get in the car with me and she looked up and my dad was holding like one of these big like pots like that you would put a plant in, like a big pot over his head. And he basically was saying, if you leave with him, I'm going to throw this at the car and basically like harm you, harm him, whatever. Like he was just that was not obviously a good thing. That was evil that he would want to do that. So, my mom, feeling like the best thing she could do was to protect me, decided to leave me with him. And, probably the hardest decision she ever had to make was to leave me with my dad. And as the story goes, I did not eat or drink from what I heard. I did not really eat anything or even drink anything for like 3 days. And on the third day, apparently, again, as it was told to me, my dad puts me in the car and takes me to where my mom was staying with my grandma, which was not too far away. Like, we're talking a small town. So it was like 5-6 miles down the road, basically. So he goes and gets me out of the car and he's like, he won't eat, he won't drink anything. I don't know what's wrong, but you've got to take him back. And, so he gives me back to my mom and my grandma. And then apparently I started eating and drinking again, which is wild. But it was like, I guess there was something in me that was like, I don't trust this dude. And this ain't about to, shake down with this guy. So, crazy that's kind of, that was a early, just kind of relationship with my dad as far as what I would experience as the kind of person that he was. So I grew up, and I had what's called visitation rights. And if you've never been a product of divorce, usually, especially back in the day, it's a little bit different now, but back in the day, you go to court and, my mom, won the dispute to have, full custody of me, but my dad had visitation rights. So basically every other Saturday, I think it was, I would go with him and I'd be with him. I would never stay for like long periods of time or anything like that. It was usually like maybe a few hours. And then I'd come home because I lived with my mom, full time. So, we did that for, years and years and years. And it was always this thing that it just, I don't know, it's kind of awkward. But at the same time, I was like, I'm spending time with my dad, so I'll take what I can get. So we did that for a few years. And, my dad was very good at portraying himself in a way that was very different than how my mom would describe him. And it's very confusing to me. Very, very confusing because I would go home and my mom did the best she could to not badmouth my dad, but at the same time, I could still see that there was some tension there. The one thing that she would say that was just outright like, hey, I don't want you to be like this because this is like your dad was lying. My mom was like, I don't want you to be a liar. I don't want you to grow up that way because that's who your dad is. And I remember that. But outside of that, my mom did a very, very good job. Very, very good job of not bad mouthing him. And I think she was wise beyond maybe even what she realized was like good wisdom as far as the impact of how that would affect me. Cause that was a good thing that she did. So moving on. So I grew up hanging out with him every other Saturday, boom, boom, boom. And then as I got to age 12, I think it was around 12, basically the courts were like, hey, you now get to choose if you go see him or not. And I made a decision to not see him anymore as often. And it was kind of like, every once in a while he'd call, we'd hang out, but I didn't have to do it every other weekend anymore. And really it was because like, I didn't feel like we ever really connected. My dad would buy me things, which you would think as a kid, you would appreciate, but really it was, to kind of pacify this idea that he wasn't in my life as much as he could have been or should have been because of all the stuff that went down. So, which brings us to this moment that I'll never forget. I remember being 14 years old, and I had just hung out with my dad probably a couple of weeks before then. And so I ended up getting some medals in band because I played saxophone in my high school band. And I remember getting some medals because of a solo or something like that. And, I got a medal for placing, top 3 or whatever it was. So anyway, got some medals, and I took them to show my dad because I was really proud of the fact that I got these medals, and he was, "Oh, great job. That's awesome." And then I got home and I was going to show my mom, or we were going to frame them or something like that. And she was like, "Hey, where's your medals?" And I'm like, "I don't know. Last time I had them, I was with my dad." She goes, "Okay, you should look for them." So I looked for them, looked in my backpack, all that kind of stuff, could not find them. So she just kind of looks at me. She's like, "The last time you had them was when?" I was like, "With my dad." She goes, "Okay." And I'm like, "Mom, like let's not do that. Like, I know what you're thinking." And she's like, "I'm just saying you should probably give your dad a call and just ask." And I was like, "No, I don't want to do that. Like, I don't want to accuse him. Like, I'm thinking like, I want to think the best of my dad. I don't want to accuse him of stealing my medals," is basically what it was. And my mom's like, "I'm just saying you should give him a call." So I'm like, "All right, yes, ma'am. Cool." So I give him a call, and the conversation starts off really, really good. And I'm like, "Hey, Dad, so good hanging out with you, da, 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 da. I have a question." He's like, "Okay, what's your question?" I was like, "Well," and I'm struggling to get this question out because I'm like, I'm about to accuse my dad of thievery, right? So I'm struggling to get this out. And I finally get it out. "Hey, Dad, last time I saw my medals was with you. Did you happen to see them?" And immediately when I said that, it was like a different person was on the phone. And he was like, what are you trying to say?" And I'm like, "I'm just asking if you see my medals." He goes, "Are you trying to say that I took them?" And I'm like, "No, I mean, yes, but not necessarily. I'm just trying to figure out, I don't know really what to say." And then he proceeds to now cuss me out on the phone. And I mean, dude cusses me smooth out. Like, "You blankety blank blank, how dare you blankety blank accuse me? What kind of son are you, blankety blank?" I mean, it was all the expletives that you're probably thinking. It was probably that and more. So I'm devastated on the phone. I'm completely devastated. I'm like, I don't know what to say. So I just like, he cusses me out, and I'm like, "Okay, I'm sorry. I'll talk to you later." Hang up the phone, and I just cried. And I cried and cried and cried and cried. And I went to my mom, and she was just like, "What?" And I kind of tell her what happened. And I cried and cried and cried and cried. And that was the last time I ever spoke to my dad. So I say that, and I just kind of let it sit for a moment, because I think many of you can relate to that story or some version of that, where the last interaction you had with your parent maybe wasn't the greatest. Maybe it wasn't what you had hoped. And again, I just want you to know you're not alone in that. So I'm 14. And if you've seen the movie Drumline with Nick Cannon, like the whole thing about him going to his dad and being like, "Hey, I became a man without you," that was going to be my plan. I was going to like graduate high school, and then I was going to like find him, and, later on in life, maybe after I had a family or whatever it was. And I was going to do that. I was going to tell him, "Hey, you weren't there for me, and I became a man without you. So take that, just like that was like my stick it to him kind of moment that I wanted to do. Never happened. Never got that. What I would say opportunity, but really that wouldn't have been a good thing anyway. But I grew up, at this time, Jazz and I have started dating, graduate high school, join the military, all the things. So you may remember in the very first episode, I talked about the dream that I had with God calling me to ministry, the dream that was really a memory. What I didn't say holistically in that was there was another dream that I had as well. And that dream was about my dad. So God was showing me stuff about this call to ministry, and then God started giving me dreams about my dad. And it was something to the effect of like, hey, I need to like try to reconcile with him. And I'm going, no way. Like, if I'm honest with you, I was like, no freaking way am I doing that. Like, it's not about to happen, man. Like, no, I'm not reconciling with this dude. But that was something I felt like God wanted me to do. So I remember coming, I was again in the military at the time. I remember coming home on leave, and we tried to find my dad. We tried to go to where we looked up some address on the internet of where he might be staying, and we tried to find him. Ended up going to this house where he was, and turns out there was a new owner or a new person that lived at that house, so it wasn't there. So I'm thinking, all right, we're good, we're done. I obeyed God and, kind of left it alone. So a few years would go by, and got out of the military, and we ended up moving to San Antonio and with my family, and we got plugged into a great church there. I was, after I got out of the military, I got a civilian job on base at Lackland Air Force Base. Shout out to Lackland Air Force Base. But so I got a job there as basically like a civilian contractor working on base at one of the dental clinics there. So we're in San Antonio. We love it. And I remember, this was wild. I remember being in the car. We're driving somewhere. The whole fam's in the car. Jalen, I believe, was my oldest, who's 12 now, was about 6 at the time. And I remember being in the car, and we're jamming, we're jamming to something. We just getting in the car, like probably listening to like Israel Holt or something. Like, we're getting it. And Jalen's like, "Hey, Dad," and I'm like, "Hey, what's up, buddy? What's going on?" Turn the music down, and he's like, "Hey, your daddy's gonna die." And I'm like, what? So me and Jazz look at each other. We're like, what? I'm sorry. What? We couldn't like, and so I try to keep my composure, and I'm like, what makes you say that? He's like all the way in the back. And I'm like, what makes you say that, bud? And he's like, I don't know. And then that was it. So I'm going, what was that? Like, we've never talked about my dad before. Like, you guys don't know your grandpa. Like, we don't talk about him. So what was that? And I kid you not, it was probably like 2 to 3 weeks later, I would learn that my dad passed away. And he passed away from leukemia. And that was a weird kind of thing that on one hand, it's like, I feel like my son just prophesied that, like, to me, that my dad was going to die. And on the other hand, it's like my dad died. And I have not talked to him since that crazy moment in 2014. So, or not 2014, sorry, when I was 14. I don't remember what exact year it was, but when I was 14 years old. So, man, like, that rocked me. And my mentor at the time, one of my mentors, found out about it, and my mom was there as well. And basically my mom was like, hey, they're doing the funeral soon, da, 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 da. Do you want me to go? And I'm like, no, that's going to be awkward for you. Like, like, even though like he died, the guy just feel like this is going to be awkward for you if you're there. And so I was like, no. But my mentor, excuse me, my mentor was like, you want me to go with you? And of course, Jazz was like, I'll go with you. I was like, yeah. So we all go to the funeral. And now, mind you, I am one of four boys on my dad's side. For my mom's side, I'm an only child. But for my dad's side, I'm one of four boys. So I have three half brothers. One of them, unfortunately, passed away as well. But here I am with my brothers at this funeral, and I'm looking at all these people on my dad's side of the family that I have not seen in years. You know, I'm a grown man at this point, and they're looking at me like, who is this kid that's now a man with a whole family? So it's kind of awkward because I knew that they knew who I was, and I knew them, even if I couldn't remember like all of them necessarily because it's been so long. But I'm like, I remember y'all, and I know you remember me. So we go through this funeral, and this is wild, y'all. What I'm about to say is so wild. So we're in this funeral, and they're doing the thing where, now granted, I walk in pretty like, my emotions are all over the place. I'm like sad, but I'm also like, who cares? Because we didn't really have a good relationship anyway. So, just a range of emotions, like across the spectrum of all the emotions: sadness, anger, confusion, all things. So we're sitting there at this funeral, and it was wild because they get up there and they're like, Mr. Collins was his name. Mr. Collins was a great man and all this stuff. And I'm going, man, please, like, if I don't want to hear y'all sit up here and lie. Like, he wasn't a good dude. Just say he wasn't a good dude. Like, and let's just call it up, pack it up, and let's bounce. And let's just, the Lord will deal with him, judgment day kind of thing. Like that was kind of the stuff I was on, if I'm being real with you. So we get there, and there was story after story after story about, hey, Mr. Collins would come over and cut my grass, and Mr. Collins helped me with my son with his homework, and Mr. Collins would come up to the church and like fix stuff, and I'm like, what? And the funeral was at the church that he was a part of, so I'm like, he was a part of a church. Like, I was so confused by that because my dad had always kind of been like, hey, I'm a Christian, but it was like he was a Christian in the sense of like he could talk a good talk, but like it wasn't like the fruit was not there. And when you kind of peeled the layer back behind his life, I'm like, the fruit is not here. But just like anybody else, he was flawed. He had his issues and things like that. So, but I'm focused on that. So as they're saying all of this stuff, I'm going, this is not the same guy that I remember. So then a couple things happened. They're like, Mr. Collins loved to worship. So, what we're going to do is we're not going to be sad. We're going to celebrate his life by praising God and worshiping God through a time of worship. And I'm like, what the? So I look at Jazz, I look at my mentors, and, from what you guys heard in the very first episode. And if you know me, like I've been a part of worship ministry for about 14 years, like being a worship pastor and a worship volunteer and a musician pretty much my whole life. So the fact that my dad loved to worship, I didn't know that. And I'm like, he loved to worship. He loved to sing. And I had always told people, it's a little morbid, I'll be honest. But I always told people, like, if I go, like, I want y'all to throw a party for me. Like, don't cry over me. Like, I want this thing to be like a worship night where it's like revival, like people are getting prayed for, somebody's giving like a gospel message and somebody's coming to Jesus. Like that's how I want to be celebrated at my funeral. And this is basically what my dad's funeral was. Like it was like a big praise party. And I'm like, what is going on right now? So we get done with that. And I would learn as the pastor gave the eulogy, I would learn that my dad loved worship music, like I said, and my dad also was in the Navy. I did not know this, y'all. My dad was in the Navy, and he was a captain. And I don't know what the nature of how long it was or anything like that, but he was in the military, and he never talked about that. During my time of getting to know him when I was a kid. So I'm like, I love worship. I was in the Navy as well. There's so many things that, I would argue I got from my mom, and I'm like my mom in this way, but I'm also just like my dad, even though I did not have proximity to him for the better part of my life. So that was wild and very, very confusing. So there's more. So we finished the funeral, and it's like, okay, all right, we're done. We're going to go to the burial site, and we're going to bury him, all the things. And I remember being there. Of course, they do the whole thing with the casket. Like it's a whole moment. And my dad's wife, who basically would be my stepmom, but because of the lack of relationship, I didn't really view her as that. But that's basically who she is. So my dad's wife came up to me, and she's like, "Do you remember me?" And I'm like, "I remember you." She goes, "I know it's been a long time, but I want you to know something." And I'm like, "Yeah." I'm like, "Here we go." She's about to give the whole like, "Your dad loves you." Da, da, da. And that's exactly what she did, but in a way that I didn't expect. And she goes, "I want you to know your dad loved you. Your dad cared about you. And there is a picture of you and your dad when you were little playing basketball. There was a picture of you and him with the basketball." And I was like, okay, that makes sense. We used to play basketball all the time, at the park, or, we had a little basketball hoop in the front yard of the house that he had. So I'm like, yeah, that makes sense, She goes, "But I want you to know your dad was beginning, when he got sick, he was beginning to write on the back of this picture a letter basically apologizing for all the stuff that he's done and the fact that he has not been there for you." And y'all, when I say I broke, I mean, it was like, open the floodgates. Here we go. Like, I was not ready for that. And I'm sitting here going, wow, not only did my dad serve in the Navy like I did, not only did my dad love music, not only did my dad at some point give his life to Jesus, like, let's just, level set that for a second. He gave his life to Jesus and started living differently because of what God did in his life. He also was starting to muster up the courage to reach out to me. And to learn about my family and all those things. And I just broke, y'all. So that messed me up. Oh man, that messed me up, because I wasn't even sure if I had fully forgiven him, which I now know I have. I've definitely have forgiven my dad. But I was still working through the lack of relationship. So, my homie, my best friend, my brother, Daniel, if you're watching this, I love you, bro. Daniel Landeros, y'all. I'm going to get him on the pod at some point. We're going to figure it out. But, my dude, we were all living at San Antonio at the time, and he goes, "You good?" I'm like, I'm all right. And just, this dude is so wise. And he hit me with this. He goes, "Are you grieving the lack of relationship, or are you grieving the relationship you could have had?" And I said, bro, if you don't get on my face, if you don't get on my face with that wisdom, I want to hear that right now. But he was exactly right. And if I'm honest, I think it's a little bit of both. Like, I think it was like, man, there were so many years that I could have seen the redemptive, restorative power of Jesus on my dad's life that I didn't get to see. And then, man, what would it have been like because of that to now have a thriving relationship as adults? But y'all didn't get to see that. I didn't get to experience that. I didn't get to that triumphant moment of reconciliation on earth. But here's what I rest knowing. I rest knowing in my heart that my dad is with Jesus right now. That he did change his life. Somewhere after that crazy conversation when I was a teenager, he had turned his life around. And even though I didn't get to see it, it resonates in my heart that he's with the Lord. And for those of you that maybe have a strange relationships with your fathers, I just want to tell you there's hope. That even if you don't see it on this side, man, I just want to encourage you right now that God is a miracle worker. He is the restorer of souls, and he can bring reconciliation where it looks like there is none. And my prayer for you is that maybe your dad is still living, and maybe you have an opportunity to reach out. And what I would say is start with forgiveness, because listen, forgiveness is not for them. Forgiveness is for you, because forgiveness is releasing the debt. It's saying, I no longer hold this account against you. I no longer hold the transgressions against you. And because of that, you free yourself of the burden of carrying that around. Because listen, like unforgiveness, Like I've heard it said by many different preachers, but unforgiveness is like you drinking poison and waiting for the other person to die. That's what walking around with unforgiveness is. So it's not worth it. And the other part that's hard for us with parental issues and father issues specifically is that if we walk around with unforgiveness, we are not really receiving the forgiveness that God has for us. See, we receive his forgiveness, and out of the overflow of that, we get to extend forgiveness to others. And man, I want that for you. Maybe you're listening to me right now. And you're like, Antoine, I hear you, and I'm not ready to do that. Understood. I totally get it. But man, on the other side of that brokenness and unforgiveness is forgiveness and the release of a weight that maybe you've been carrying for a long time, but you're not supposed to carry. Let Jesus carry that for you. And I share this so that way it can maybe bring some hope to someone who's listening, bring some hope to someone that needs to hear maybe a story that didn't end the way that you would hope, in way of triumph on earth, but there's triumph in heaven. And that's for my dad. I believe that I hopefully will get to see him again one day in heaven when we're worshiping Jesus, holy, 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 all together with the angels and just praying. My prayer is that I get to see that. My prayer is that you get to experience that as well. So I feel like right now I need to pray for you. If you are experiencing any kind of brokenness with any of your parents, but specifically your father. So God, right now, I just pray over my friend listening. They may be carrying so much right now with issues with their dad, God. And I pray right now in the name of Jesus that you allow them the courage and the boldness and the bravery to step into forgiving their dad, to not allowing this fatherlessness wound to overtake them, God. But they will walk in healing and freedom, that they will extend forgiveness as you have already forgiven them, Lord, so that way they could be set free and they could set a new course, hopefully ending with reconciliation that we get to witness and see. God, I'm asking you this in Jesus' name. Amen. Thank you for letting me pray over you. Thank you for listening to my whole story with my dad. It's a big part of my journey. And it's even leaked over into how I parent, especially in the early years. I was overcompensating and trying way too hard. And I'm so thankful for a wife that reminded me that I did not have to be something my dad wasn't. I just had to be fully who I am and who God's called me to be. I didn't have to replace him. I just had to walk in who I authentically am. And this is humble, y'all. I told you. Well, we talk about the real stuff, and this is real for me. And I'm sure on the other side of this, as you're watching, maybe elements of my story resonate with you because it's real for you as well. So thank you for listening, and I hope this encourages you. If you know someone that has dealt with issues with their parents or specifically their fathers, I want you to share this with them. Again, this is not so that way you can say, listen to how great Antoine is. No, I just want to be a blessing to anybody that's struggling the way that I have, because I've had time to process this. But man, I spent many years, though, very confused and angry at my dad. So share this with someone who you know it'll be a blessing to them and a benefit to them. And I cannot wait until next time, another episode of Humble, where we talk about the real stuff. Again, you can support us on Patreon, patreon.com/Humble Podcast. There's different ways, different tiers that you can support on there, all in an effort to pour back into this ministry, to be able to be a blessing to you and anybody else that listens. Thank you so much for being a supporter. Thank you so much for being a part of this community. And I cannot wait until next time. One more time, Humble, where we talk about the real stuff. I'll see you next time. Peace.